Dr. Anthony Harper here, blessed to be at the White House with John Gizzi of Newsmax, and thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure.
And curious, how Newsmax, your involvement with Newsmax happened here. I know a lot of evangelical Christians are concerned about the lack of conservative news. You've heard that term, conservative news. So, how were you attracted into working for Newsmax and addressing people's concerns that have been unhappy with other media sources?
Well, Anthony, I've been doing that for a lot longer than Newsmax was even around. I started with Human Events, the nation's oldest conservative news weekly, and Ronald Reagan's favorite publication. That was back in 1979. And I had two great mentors in the then owners of Human Events, Tom Winter and Alan Riskin. I covered American politics as well as presidential campaigns and the White House. It was under the aegis of Human Events I got my hard pass 20 years ago. In 2013, I finally made a move over to Newsmax, which was more advanced in terms of an online presence and in its genesis of being on television. And of course, now there's Newsmax TV, which is available in 41 million homes, our online presence, and our hard magazine, which has 200,000 subscribers.
How would you differentiate Newsmax from One America News or some other online news sources?
Well, there's two ways. I think number one, the fact that Newsmax is spread into such diverse areas of the media as print and online, as well as its television network. But also there's one thing. Newsmax is a conservative publication, but we are not afraid to be critical of conservatives when the time comes. We are not lock in step with President Trump, for example. And let me give you an example. The president offered a strong defense Sunday night of his nominee to the Supreme Court, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, and he suggested there was anti-Catholicism in this. Now, I pointed out to him that only 2 Catholic bishops have come out and said the same thing. Would he have the support of the National Conference of Catholic Bishops? And he said they'll come along. Well, it turns out the National Council of Catholic Bishops, while many individually may be supportive and sympathetic to Judge Barrett, does not endorse candidates for the bench or put out statements.
Oh, okay.
And again, this is not biased, it is not opinion, it is simply reporting, which is what I've been doing for 40 years.
Well, as we know, and I would say a lot of people would say that there is no perfect news source.
No.
And, there are issues that we have to deal with, and we can't agree with everyone on every issue.
No.
I know evangelical Christians don't always agree with the political leaders on every issue.
No.
Israel's a hot topic, and I wanted to talk with you about Israel.
Certainly.
And we have a mutual friend in Corky, Hawthorne, and, he introduced me to you, and he was in the White House one day with us. And so how did you become interested in Israel and about what's going on there, and especially about the U.S.-Israel relationship?
Israel is the Holy Land, and that should merit interest from just about everyone. But more importantly, as far as the secular world is concerned, it is the lone democracy in the Middle East at this point. If someone wants to find a government that has values similar to those of the United States, one looks to Israel. Although I will admit, Tunisia is coming along, and it has gotten away from the strong-arm leadership of Ben Ali 8 years ago, and now has democratic elections for president as well as for a parliament. But Israel has had this since 1948, and they've had peaceful transitions of power as well as representation for just about any party that competes in the Knesset. Some say that's a reason that governments don't stand too long. But the other factor is that when it comes to the war on terror, and particularly to Iran today, one can look at other countries and find a lot of fair weather friends, but only one true foul weather friend, and that's Israel.
Well, Israel is such a hot topic. Jerusalem being the most contested city in the world, people have fought over that property for so much. And I'm curious, besides me, I know there are other people Israel issues, but that doesn't seem to be the primary issue of the news beat for a lot of reporters here.
No, it doesn't. And remember one thing. We live in a time that is most unusual. Confucius once said, "May you live in interesting times," and he meant that as a curse. We're perplexed, befuddled, and frustrated by the COVID-19 virus. We also have great political division in this country. My parents told me that during the Depression, it was the closest America came since the Civil War to breaking apart. That's not going to happen now, but there's going to be a lot of bad vibrations and feelings over everything from the economy to the cultural issues, hence the great interest in who sits on the Supreme Court. That said, foreign policy is discussed in presidential campaigns for perhaps 45 minutes. People just don't look beyond the pocketbook issues, the courts, and services and the nature of government. Now, that said, Israel is critically important for a number of reasons. Iran is still ruled by a theocracy that is anything but Christian, number one, and that still refers to the United States as the great Satan and Israel itself as the little Satan. Turkey under Erdogan is an untrustworthy ally, truly a fair weather friend, and now trying to get its hands into so many other places, in Libya, in the Mediterranean, and who knows where else. When you're dealing with like that, the lackeys in Lebanon, the goons in Gaza, you have to have a reliable ally. Hence the importance of Middle East politics and of Israel. Now, the United States under President Trump has recognized Jerusalem as the capital, something 6 presidents would say they did, and this president finally did. In addition, he's helped pave the way for Israel to have a more convivial relationship with the Arab Emirates or Bahrain. These are important matters, but whenever I talk to anyone connected with Israel, it all goes back to his tearing up the Iran agreement and stopping the dealings with Tehran and the Ayatollahs.
What makes Israel, that I see, and many evangelicals see, unique in the Middle East is the religious freedom. I mean, they don't sanction the Christian churches there. Now, if in Saudi Arabia, there's not the Christians aren't allowed to openly. They don't have church services. They don't seem to tolerate the Christian worldview or other religions there. And so I'm curious, and thinking along with other evangelicals with this recent peace deal, and the trend towards that, if the other Arab countries are going to be better at protecting the religious freedoms of people in their nations.
I think that would have to come later. Security always comes first. And I know Prime Minister Netanyahu has talked about smaller government, more of a market economy, but you can't really deal with these things when you're worried about the Shatuka rockets hitting. So I think these things may come down the line. But the threat exists and won't go away. I mentioned Turkey a little while ago, and we've seen a great museum for all faiths now turned into a place where Muslims can worship every day at the right hours that are there, in total violation of what the founder of modern Turkey, Mr. Ataturk, wanted with this. In addition, we're seeing in Turkey a Christian pastor who led so many people to Jesus Christ, including ISIS members that he was imprisoned with, Pastor Brunson, finally released after nearly 4 years and brought back to the United States. My friend Jensu Kamlabel, the Washington bureau chief for Hurriyet, the oldest publication in Turkey, was the first journalist to get an interview with him at his church in North Carolina. The story is spiked. Maybe that's why she's no longer the bureau chief for Hurriyet. Well, this is what we deal with.
I know the Turkey issue is really a concern. I've heard President Trump, others that talked about Turkey, being part of the European Union and NATO, whatever issue.
It is part of NATO.
NATO, and so that if they side with China in any way, there's been criticism for instance, if there's siding with Iran. If those nations help Iran, then how can they be truly a NATO member or
that's
an
a
ally
question.
in some ways?
It's a question people wonder, and I posed this question to the foreign ministers of the Czech Republic, of Poland, of Hungary, and yes, Greece. Not one of them would talk about expelling Turkey from NATO because, to summarize their replies to me, how do you expel someone who has the second largest army in NATO?
Right. So we got a lot of serious issues to deal with. I'm just curious, and the readers might want to know about it. Your journalism experience, education, how you got into this. Did you go to journalism school? Do you have degrees in that area? How did you get in that?
I'm a graduate of Fairfield University, a Jesuit school in Connecticut. I was a very good typist all through school, and after that I worked as a clerk typist for the tax assessor's office. I came to Washington. I worked by day as a file clerk and by night for Human Events till they made me a permanent reporter. That's how it all started in 4 sentences.
Oh, wow. Well, reporters here have a diversity of background experiences, lawyers and tax people or whatever, but it's great to have John Gizzi from Newsmax to join me here in the James Brady Press Room today.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, and God bless you.
Thank you. We need his blessing, don't we?
We do.